I'm Cindy Warner, and I'm a human resources representative from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Now, I grew up in Milwaukee and have an MSHR from Marquette University and spent about 15 years in the human resources field. Most of it was in leadership development and traveling globally around the world with Kimberly Clark. And I partnered quite frequently with Korn Ferry and the Center for Creative Leadership to create and implement global leadership development programs. And what I can tell you is that the issues that we face at leadership here in lovely Wisconsin are the same around the world. Whether you're in Thailand or Peru or Brazil or London or France, anywhere in the world, we all deal with the same things around teaching people interpersonal skills, managing conflict, having executive presence, and all of those things. And I came across this model purely by accident when I got a horse, and he taught me more about leadership than I had taught or learned the previous 25 years. So I wanted to find out how that horse did what he did to teach me leadership, and I dug into the research behind why that worked, and I came out with all this information around how our bodies work and the intelligence that we carry, not only in our head brain, but also in our heart and in our core. And there's actually science that proves that we do that, which is what I'll share with you, part of what I'll share with you today. So this is what we're going to cover. So many of you may be familiar with the science of emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman and Travis Bradbury, kind of the four-step model of self-awareness, self-management, other awareness, and other management is kind of the 4 steps of emotional intelligence. How many of you are familiar with that? Okay, so you know that one. Well, the question that I always had when I heard about those models and read about them and the competencies associated with them was about what exactly are we aware of? And what exactly are we managing? This thing called emotions. And the reason that it matters is because there's a lot of beautiful wisdom and brilliance in our hearts and in our core that I don't want to just be aware of and manage. I want us to be able to use, because our emotions are with us to protect and inform us. They're not there just for fun, and they link our mind and our heart and our soul and our spirit. And so I want to bring forward the concept of paying attention to all 3 of your brains, the one in your head, as well as the one in your heart and the one in your core. In his groundbreaking book, Fred Keel, this book, Return on Character, is groundbreaking in that he defines these 4 characteristics: integrity, responsibility, forgiveness, and compassion. And he proves that leaders that have those are more successful by any measure, whether it's return on investment, profitability, engagement, or diversity and inclusion, cultural competence. By any measure, the leaders that have these things and use them as part of their leadership are far more effective. Now, intuitively, that makes sense. But what's cool about this is there's actual proof in it. That he brings. And then he talks about the best leaders that truly do integrate all 4 of those things with their leadership style. He talks about the ones that think they're that good. He calls them the virtuosos. And he says the ones that think they're virtuosos, he calls them the self-involved leaders. They have one characteristic that stops them from being virtuosos. Would anyone like to guess what that is? Ego? Anybody else? The willingness to ask for, receive, and act on feedback. So how many of us in here have that leader that we've given the 360 to, we've given the feedback to, we've done the Hogan assessment, and they just don't care, don't get it, they're getting results, and it's not working? That's a problem, right? So this model will maybe help you reach them and meet them where they are. So I want to talk about our 3 brains. Have any of you ever had a conversation that went something like this? Steve is a fantastic, logical, clear thinker. He is fantastic at the functional, technical part of his job. But you know, he really could learn how to connect with people, and he really could handle having more courage to confront the difficult issues and conversations, and maybe get a little more executive presence. Have you ever had a person like that? Who has? Somebody that's very good at the functional, technical, but needs work on the other two? Well, it turns out that we do have these three neurocenters of intelligence in our head, our heart, and our core. And I like to call them the superpowers of clarity, connection, and courage, because they all have a very important role to play in who we are and our whole selves. And so Steve, the one we just talked about, probably is using his clarity superpower as his default. All of us have one of them that's a default that we use by habit most of the time. And the leaders that learn how to integrate the wisdom and brilliance in the other two brains are the ones that exponentially increase their productivity and the success of their organizations. So you're here today and you're going to learn how to access all of your wisdom and brilliance in all three of your brains. So back to Steve with the functional technical skills. So sayings like, let's think this through, let's figure this out, I think so, put on your thinking cap. Those all reflect a person that is working with what I call the clarity superpower, the neocortex part of their brain, which is where we have the central processing unit of the human, right? Logic, information processing, navigation, and language, by the way, is in our neocortex. It's interesting to know that we actually learn relationship and interpersonal skills in a completely different part of our brain than the neocortex. We actually learn interpersonal skills in the limbic part of our brain. And our limbic brain only learns from experience. Our limbic brain, we only learn interpersonal skills by experiencing them. So those of you that are trying to teach interpersonal skills and diversity and inclusion and cultural competence, the way to have people behave differently is to have them experience things differently. The sayings, do as I say, not as I do, right? Or actions speak louder than words. Those are sayings that reflect the fact that we know what counts is what we do that matters. And if we're trying to tell people how to behave, we are literally asking them to use the wrong tool for the job in our brains in some ways. Not that clarity doesn't have a role to play in that, but the behavior is what's going to matter. And that's just our first brain. So imagine all three of our brains have some electromagnetic force that emanate, right, from us just because. So now think about that electromagnetic force from your head brain. And now double it. And now times it by 10, by 100, by 1,000. Now by 5,000. The human heart has 5,000 times the electromagnetic force of the human brain and 60 times the amplitude. The HeartMath Institute, I'm going to play this video, let's see if I can show it here, that talks more about the amazing connection between our heart and our brain.
The HeartMath tools and techniques really help you access the intelligence of the heart so we can make better choices in the moment and really navigate these stressful times. What we hear from people across the world, across all professions, is that stress, anxiety, and overwhelm are really out of hand. And a lot of this is due to so much change that's happening. And the way our brains work, we don't like change. Humans do not like change, especially unexpected change or change that we're not in control of. And as it turns out, one of the most effective ways to really reduce stress and anxiety and even feelings of overwhelm is to learn how to access the intelligence of the heart and shift the rhythms of the heart, which sends a different neural message to the brain. So one aspect of our research is really focused on developing simple, practical, user-friendly tools and techniques that allow people to really manage their stress. So a lot of people, probably even today if you think about it, have had a situation where you were being told to do something or you wanted something, but there was a deeper sense or a deeper feeling that it's probably not the best choice. So that's what I mean by that lack of alignment. And that can really be a huge source of stress for people until they learn how to really get the alignment between the heart and brain, which is where coherence comes in. That's when the heart, mind, and emotions are aligned and working together harmoniously. Our basic research done here at the HeartMath Research Center focused more on the physiology of how the heart and brain communicate. Interestingly, a lot of people are surprised to learn that the heart sends more information through the nervous system to the brain than the other way around. And that sounds like some new discovery, but it's not. This has actually been known since the late 1800s. It's basic physiology. But this is important because the quality of these signals sent from the heart to the brain have profound effects on brain function, our mental clarity, even our emotional experience. So the brain is largely interpreting the signals from the heart to create how we feel. So this is why we focus on the heart so much, because if you can shift the rhythms of the heart, you can quickly improve brain function, reduce feelings of anxiety, stress, overwhelm, and so on. But it takes a different doorway, the heart. So the HeartMath tools and techniques are really designed to shift the rhythms of the heart, which changes the ascending information from the heart to the brain, which is absolutely necessary in order to establish a new baseline. And without establishing a new baseline, we really can't, it's impossible to have sustained change or improvements in our health and our emotional experience. So when we get our systems coherent and have the alignment between heart and brain, that's really when we access that deeper intuition that we have within, inner guidance. So we have a new sense of clarity in a lot of decisions that can seem complex otherwise.
So that's the scientific proof from the HeartMath Institute that how we feel literally does affect our performance. Studies have shown that happy people are 70% more productive. 70% more productive because their heart is in it, literally. And the thing, Carla McLaren, Nancy Wade O'Brien, and some other folks have done some incredible work on the messages of emotions. And I love this chart because for many clients of mine, this is life-changing. Our emotions actually have messages that matter to us, and that if we learn to pay attention to them, we can actually learn from what they're telling us and impact ourselves and others around us more effectively. So anger, for example, is around boundaries. If you think about the last time you were angry at someone, they probably hit a boundary that was important to you, right? Something that needed protection. And so the questions to ask of anger is what needs to be protected and what boundary needs to be established or restored. And anger in its purest form is nothing more than a message that something important to us needs defending here, and asking us to have the self-respect and the courage to defend something that matters. In its purest form, that's what anger is. And if we don't listen to it, it escalates. That's the thing about emotions. They'll get louder until we hear them. Now, I have an asterisk there around agitation and anxiety. Does anyone in here ever have a person that they walk in the room and you're agitated just by them showing up? Bless you. I love my HR colleagues. I have a sister like that. What that's about, yeah, I know. Every Thanksgiving. Oh. What that's about, interestingly enough, and it feels like anger, right? It feels, ugh. What it actually is how they're presenting to you, what's showing up externally is not what's really going on behind. There's something else going on behind that's not congruent. Remember you talked about congruence? There's something not congruent about what they're showing up with. And it may have nothing to do with you or the situation. In my sister's case, it didn't. It was all about her mess. But, you know, she had that. They can look one way, and your heart coherence, your heart, because of the electromagnetic force that seeks out and learns and remembers and picks up on other people's heart stuff, you feel that, right? You've walked into rooms and said, oh God, this feels kind of funny in here, what happened, right? Most of us have had that. That's your electromagnetic, part of that at least is the electromagnetic force of your heart. Scientists can actually measure our heart rate 10 feet away. And we can synchronize heartbeats during interaction. There's the old, many people know the statistic of 73% of communication is not verbal. Well, some of that's body language and tone of voice, but some of it is the emotion that's emanating from our heart that's showing up. And the executives and people that have empathy are more in touch with and in tune with that. So a little bit more about these other ones. Fear and vulnerability. The difference between fear and vulnerability is fear is actually based on a physical danger, and our message there is to escape or defend. How many of you are familiar with Brené Brown's work in vulnerability? So vulnerability, the message is that something significant is about to change or be revealed. An internal threat to our self-image, beliefs, comfortable habits, and the questions to ask when we feel vulnerable are, what exactly is it that's being challenged? And how might life change if I accept that insight? So when you think about giving constructive feedback or having the confidence to manage conflict, what we are asking someone to do is to think about themselves differently. They're literally vulnerable because we're asking them to see themselves in a different way than they do and change. So that's one of the reasons that managing conflict and giving feedback for improvement can be so hard to do. And then sadness. The message of sadness is that loss is imminent and in our best interest. And the questions to ask are what must be released and what must be rejuvenated and supported. And the difference between sadness and grief is that sadness, we have a choice about when and how to let go. And grief it's already gone. So what I love about this, Nancy Wade O'Brien, Carla McLaren wrote the books, The Messages of Emotion and Emotional Genius by Carla McLaren, are phenomenal works that get into 25 of these emotions. And I use this a lot as I coach clients to pay attention to this. And the beauty of it is, this starts in our heart, and we have to use our neocortex, our clarity superpower, to recognize what this is and ask these questions. And then we have to have the courage in our core, the brain of action, to actually act on what it's telling us. So it's a beautiful way to integrate our thoughts, our emotions, and our courage to act, our clarity, our connection, and our courage, as I call it. So back to this for just a minute, because I want to talk about the core, or the courage, the last brain. I want to read you something. Is anyone here into kombucha? Does anybody know what it is? Okay, so you know what it is. It's about fermented tea, and there's a whole movement now. Back in 2001, the Harvard Medical School published a work called The Sensitive Gut. And it talks all about this connection between our gut and our brain. And I want to read you this. It's unbelievable. In addition to the brain in your head, the one you've been told does all the work. You have a brain in your gut, too, called the enteric nervous system. Consisting of neurons that line the digestive tract from esophagus to colon, your enteric brain carries out complex processes and is capable of learning and remembering, just like the one in your head. It is the seat of what we call gut instinct. Connected by the vagus nerve from the day we're born, it acts as a gut-brain axis that sends and receives signals that control heart rate, sweating, etc. Nearly 90% of all stimulation of the vagus nerve originates in the gut, making it a key pathway to communication to the brain. So where our gut comes in, where our third brain, I like to call it our courage superpower, is taking action. It's taking, what are we going to do with it? If you think about phrases like, he's got guts. Oh, here's one. So you have a person, Joe, charges off and does stuff. He demands accountability, he pushes the envelope, he's got a bias for action, he just goes off and does stuff. I wish he'd slow down and think about the ramifications once in a while, or maybe consider how people might feel about it. Right? Joe's default superpower is courage, and it's a wonderful thing because it does get things done. But Joe would be so much more powerful and impactful if he could learn to slow down and pay attention to the other two brains. I'm going to give you a quick exercise. I want you to think of these things as I say them. Zebra, pencil, tree, conference. Were you able to think of those? Yeah? Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to feel these emotions as I say them. Angry, frustrated, sad, thrilled. Were you able to keep up? The human heart does not work as fast as technology and the neocortex. Daniel Goleman, the father of the term emotional intelligence, just co-authored a book called Altered Traits. It's on the curriculum of the Fluno Center in Madison, expounding on the virtues of meditation to help leaders be more effective. Fred Keel, who wrote Return on Character, advises to practice mindfulness to help integrate our mind and our heart. The Center for Exceptional Leadership at St. Norbert College has a whole study on the contemplative leader. And good leadership development programs often have a section that's about reflection, because we need to take the time to pay attention to what our heart and our core are saying. They don't communicate the same way as our neocortex. And we need to learn how to pay attention to those. Does that make sense? Yeah? So some of you right now are thinking, God, she's throwing a lot of science at me, but I'm not sure I believe it. I want to know more about these books. This is kind of different. I don't know, but interesting. How many? If you have the courage to raise your hand. Thank you. Okay, some of you are saying that heart stuff. Oh my gosh, that resonates with me. I so get that. That's how I am. My connection, my superpower is connection. How many? Yes. Many HR people. Yes. You're often the heart brain for your organizations, being in HR, I think. And then there's the courage. There's the courage people. Some of you are saying, gosh darn it, she's given us all this information. Now what are we going to do with it? And she's got, 10 minutes, 45 minutes left. So let's get on with it, right? So those are the three brains that are going on. And I would invite you to think about which one you're at right now, because that's probably your default brain that you just use out of habit. And what I'd like to invite you to do is start to pay attention to the other two. And if you think about, to me it's just so magical, because you already have all this brilliance and all this wisdom. We all do. It's just a matter of knowing it's there and learning how to access it. You know the saying, ready, aim, fire? Right? Ready, aim, fire. I, personally, am a fire, aim, ready. I'm going to do a talk at the conference. Oh, shoot, what's it going to be about? Oh, darn, I'm scared. That's kind of the order that I operate in, right? So which are you? Are you a ready, aim, fire? Are you a fire, aim, ready? Are you a ready, 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 fire, aim? What are ya? Okay. Think of, it's a cool thing. If you think, some of you may be familiar with the movie The Wizard of Oz. How many? Okay, so you know that movie. So the Scarecrow had the brain, the Lion had the heart, and the Tin Man had the heart, and the Lion had the courage, right? And she realized in the end that she had it all along. This has been around for a while, but it hasn't gone mainstream, and it sure hasn't come into leadership in a way that's important, that works. So that's what I'm here to try to bring to you, is a way that it works. So here's the benefits of the different brains. And again, if you think about people in your organization that you struggle the most with, my guess is that their brain is a different brain than yours. Their default brain is a different default brain. Okay? So benefits of the head brain is that logic, information processing, planning, navigation, and language. The people that are always in their head struggle with empathy, responding to emotion, and taking action. The benefits of a heart, we connect. Who has a person? Everybody loves Sue. Sue inspires everyone. Everyone wants to work for her. She's amazing. And that company picnic, she's a rock star, man. She's got that down. She's connection superpower all the way. What Sue could use work on is giving her team more strategic direction, and it would be nice if she could get a little more done sometimes. Okay, that's a heart default. And then lastly, the gut, courage, action, tenacity, and instinct. The challenges and opportunities are messy and foot and mouth. You know, we can stick our feet in our mouth a lot. I do. Sorry. It's the way we are. So another thing to note is that when we learn, learning actually goes this way. It travels through our gut first, then our heart, then our brain, which is another reason why experiential learning is so valuable and important and helps us, because we literally learn first by doing with action. A couple other things about the wisdom of emotion. How many of you have heard of emotional contagion? That's where we catch another person's emotion. Okay, so one of the key things to remember when you're looking at paying attention to your emotions is paying attention to whose emotion is it, yours or theirs. You know, some of you, I know how it is when you walk into a room and you feel something, right? You're feeling someone's emotion. It's just important to know which is yours and which is theirs. And sometimes highly sensitive people will respond to others' emotions rather than their own. I used to facilitate executive leadership groups, and I would get so overwrought by the end of the session, I didn't know what to do with myself. I would just be like this. And the psychologist said to me, that's because you're absorbing all the emotion in the room. That's not being said. You're picking up on it, and that's what's getting to you, is all that's going on. It's kind of interesting. The heart coherence we talked about. The more often you're happy, the more productive you'll be, the better your performance will be. That's why one reason engagement is such a big deal nowadays, right? And morale and culture, because happy people are far more productive. And then to optimize it, it's important to recognize what is yours, what emotions are yours, and what emotions are others people's. And use your witnessing mind to ask the questions. Because all three of the superpowers matter, right? Clarity, connection, courage. And the more we can integrate and practice all three, using all three, and help our leaders use all three, the more effective we can be. Oh, this is an interesting exercise around our heart's purpose. Anything you're doing, anytime, this is just kind of an interesting exercise. Anytime, say, do I love this? Or can I handle this? And you'll know instantly which is true. Don't overthink it. And you may not change anything, but if you ask yourself that over time, you can start to steer your life and your career towards your heart's purpose and your heart's desire. It's a very simple way to use the wisdom of your heart. So here's a personal integration exercise where we integrate thought, emotion, and intuition in all three brains. Two easy places to kind of practice. Decision making. Think about a decision that you're about to make or one that you've recently made. Practice using all three brains. And it's very simple. Feel free to grab a bookmark. I have a bookmark over there that has the questions. What do I think about this? How do I feel about it? And what should I do with it? And you may do the exact same thing, but you'll be more effective at it. So for example, when an executive has to fire an employee, none of us have been in any of those, right? The ones that are very clear about the reasons, that have compassion, but also courage to know it's the right decision, they actually have a more effective termination than the people that don't. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's because they're aligned. They got it clear in all three superpowers. And then when you're looking at communication, sometimes when the PR people or whoever writes communications, it's really cool if you can practice using all three brains as you evaluate it. What is the logic? What is the why? What is the reason? How do we feel about it? And what do we do with it? What do we want people to do? And a lot of people figure out 1 or 2 or 3 of these already, but in the context of understanding the 3 brains, it can really help you craft any communication anytime with anyone, because you're going to hit whichever default they're in. Does that make sense? Yeah. When all 3 brains show up in leadership, there's 4 things all leaders need work on in general: self-awareness, communication, influencing, and then learning and emotional agility, the agility to recover from tough emotional things, resilience, right? All of those are supported and learned better and more effectively when we integrate what we think, how we feel, and what action to take. So for example, when you see executive presence and confidence, this is one that has a lot to do with the courage superpower. They need to have the courage to get up and talk and to show up and be there. When I coach executives on that's what it's about, is doing things and getting other people to move. And we start with getting people, or horses, to move physically first. And once they get them and they figure out what that energy feels like, and then their executive presence and confidence goes up very quickly once they learn how to activate that core courage superpower. Inspirational communication, the whole thing about activating our hearts. So a lot of times executives are good at pieces, but they want to learn how to inspire and motivate. Well, the answer is, how do you feel about it? Because you can't empathize if it's not yours, right? Own yours. How do you feel about this? And where are you at? And where do you show up? And now how do you invite other people to show up, to inspire and engage? And then power and compassion when it comes to conflict management and challenging conversations. So you have to have, for conflict management, again, the courage, the compassion, and the logic to know this is what needs to happen, and then be able to navigate between the 3 brains during the conversation to meet them where they are. And decision-making and risk-taking actually improves, especially risk-taking improves when we have leaders that start to pay more attention to their gut. What does your gut say? And some of us may know executives, I know a few, that say their career is built on their gut instinct. Their best moves were made with their gut, right? So activating all 3 and learning to talk in this language. And it's actually quite simple, if you think about it compared to a DISC assessment or some of the other tools that we use. Just recognizing, is it thought, is it emotion, or is it action? Which brain are they in? That's how it can help us. So I talked a little bit about, and then we'll practice. I talked a little bit about mindfulness, meditation, and yoga as being ways to build integration. That's why these work, is because they slow us down enough to learn to pay attention to our heart and our core superpowers, to our connection and our courage superpowers. They're different than our neocortex. You always have those leaders when you're doing a leadership development program and they want information download the whole time, and can we do it in 2 hours instead of 3? Those guys that just cut out all the role plays and stuff and just bang, right? They want a clarity superpower the thing. And we actually learn better, right, when we integrate all 3. So mindfulness, meditation, and yoga, coaching, and experiential learning. Coaching, let's talk about what that looks like. So I mentioned we practice ourselves. What do I think? How do I feel? And what do I want to do? So that's us. So the first thing when it comes to us is recognize which brain you're in. And then the way that I put it to coaches is invite the other 2 to have a seat at the table. So, okay, I know how I feel about this. Okay, heart superpower, can you just rest for a minute? Let's ask clarity and connection and courage. Ask clarity and courage what they think. Now be quiet. Be quiet, connection. Listen to the other 2 and let's hear them. So it starts with us being able to practice that. And again, like I said, I love this because you already have it all. You know, it's not something you have to go out and use. It's just being aware, practice being aware. And then use that knowledge and wisdom. When we coach other people, here's how it works. Here's how I do it. You can do it however you want, but this is how I do it. First, meet them where they are in the brain they're in. Pause. Invite the other two brains to show up, and then recognize the results. Does that make sense? So let me give you an example. An emotion is a good one because that's the one that's the hardest for people. The thing that people need most when they're emotional is validation of the feeling. If you take nothing else away from this session, the thing people need most when they're having a strong emotion is validation of that emotion. And it's best if you can name that emotion. Do you ever say, I understand, but? How does that work for empathy? Why are you laughing? Why does I understand, but not work? Pardon me? Because number one, you don't understand. Chances are you don't, and even if you do, they don't care. Right? And number two, you're changing the focus to you, not them. So you're not showing empathy where they are. You're not meeting them where they are. Does that make sense? So for example, this guy's been late 4 times out of the last 5 days, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. God, isn't that frustrating when that happens? Somebody just doesn't show up. Meet them where they are. Would you like to talk about why that is and what we might be able to do about it, some different strategies, and then decide what action we want to take? Great. We've talked about it. We think we have a plan of action. We're going to do this. How do you feel about it before they walk out? Good? Yeah. Off you go. I coached a lady that was in compliance. Oh man, all head and all core. Man, everything was logic and getting things done. And everything stopped when I said, so how are you doing with this? How do you feel when you're telling people this? And so she had to learn and how do they feel when you do it? And how can you help that you and them get it together? Pull all three in. So it's a really simple but very powerful way to look at emotional intelligence by using all three of our brains. It's simple, but it's real. And the best way, the HeartMath Institute talks about this, to practice relational skills. Relational skills, we talked about that, right? Is via experiential relational learning with others who provide objective, honest, real-time, non-judgmental biofeedback. So the implications for leadership development programs. Number one, incorporate reflection. And again, the clarity folks might not like that. The courage folks might not like that. We have to, kind of invite the third brain to show up a little bit. Number two, coach for that 3-brain integration that we talked about. And then give people experiential learning, recognizing that it comes this way, right? We pretty much know that already, that experiential learning works the best. But it will help you to know to invite all 3 brains to work when they're having those experiences. The picture you see on the right is from St. Norbert College. What it says down here is the conversion. And so the guy laying there is St. Norbert. And I find that fascinating because while he's getting converted, the most spiritually powerful thing anyone can have happen to them, he's completely unconscious while this is happening. And who's absorbing it all and showing it all? The horse, right? And every sinew of his body is showing it. So this is how a lot of people operate. They operate in their clarity superpower and their courage superpower, and they practice awareness and then manage this. And I'm here to say, let that brilliance show up and pay attention to it. And that's what brings you authenticity, engagement, more culturally aware, culturally competent, diverse, and inclusive organizations, and ultimately more successful ones, according to Fred Keel. So here's a comment about soft skills. People want to know, how do you build soft skills? There's no such thing. It's behavior. And we want to use our limbic brain, and we want to incorporate all three brains doing it. So this is an example. So you select a soft skill. I want to give constructive feedback to someone that has a hard time taking it. Okay. Set an intention. I'm going to have this discussion on this day at this time. Select a situation. Okay, here it is, the practice situation. Do it. Okay, this is, Joe, this is what's going on. This is what I'd like to see changed. Recognize he might be vulnerable. We want to address that. We want to get logical. What are we going to do with it, et cetera. Practice using all three. And then before you leave, ask how he feels about it and what he's going to do differently and if it made sense to him before they leave. Then you can measure the results of what you did and how well it worked for all three of that person's brains. And if you miss one, you could be missing an opportunity to help that person. Does that make sense? Yes? Yeah, good. So in summary, use your three brains. Harness the wisdom and the power. Recognize which one is your default. I invite you to. And then invite the other two brains to show up. Give them a seat at the table, see what they say, what they think. What's yours, and recognize what's yours and what's other people's, because those emotions can get you sometimes. You want to practice paying attention. Use that witnessing mind to really pay attention to what your emotions are telling you and use what they're saying. And in other people, help them do that too. This is very new for executives in corporate America. And listen carefully to the results. So somebody walks in your office and says, I think blah, 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 blah. I don't feel this, I don't feel like this is right. What are we going to do here? Come on, let's get on, right away which brain they're in, right? So practice paying attention, and you can really help yourself and them the more you can integrate all three. And then use what we've learned in these situations. I have found this to be incredibly powerful. Building executive presence and confidence, communicating not only to inform, but also to engage and inspire. Manage conflict with both power and compassion, so you can have both and still do the tough things. It's really in that electromagnetic message you're sending, that emotional message you're sending, that can really help. And it will help you make better decisions and take more risks if you use it. And of course, she knew this all along, right? Forget what you said, what you did. They'll never forget how you made them feel. The heart. Questions. So here's in closing, and then I'll answer questions. But I invite you. I hope that you've learned something. I hope that you feel good about coming today and are glad you came. And I hope you found something that you can use. And I invite you to ignite your potential by accessing all three of your brains, your clarity, your connection, and your courage. Okay? Make sense? Yes? Anyone have questions on how this works? Comments? Feedback? Does it make sense? Yeah, please.
For people who talk about who are highly sensitive, what do you do with them then? So if they're sensitive and they're picking up on a lot of emotions and they can't sort their own emotions out.
What's going on? Settle them down. A couple things. So you're talking about these people that are just so sensitive. A few things. Number one, meet them where they are. Empathize that it's very real for them. That's number one what I do. I do everything I can to manage my own electromagnetic force to stay very calm and very relaxed and get them in an environment and a situation where all my heart softness can be theirs. And that helps a lot. And then ask them what their experience is. And then go with what they tell you and help them process the emotion, if it's emotion. And then eventually, as you work through that, you can get to logic and language and kind of what to do with it, and then how to act differently. But it starts with being very careful meeting them where they are. And if you don't know where they are, what do you do?
Flip side of that, if you're dealing with someone who's very much logical and reasonable.
Yes.
And in fluffy, let's not talk about emotions, that's not important. How do you try to help them?
Thank you.
If I ask this person, how do you feel, they're gonna laugh at me.
Well, meet them where they are. Okay, so what I like to say, and I'm going to use terrible generalizations here. Okay, clarity is a lot of times finance, engineering, and IT, right? Connection is a lot of times HR or marketing or sales. Courage is a lot of times operations. And what happens when they don't talk to each other? Right? So it starts with meeting them where they are and asking them what's going on with them always. So if they're saying it's logical, then ask them to invite the other two brains. Are you willing? So I understand that this is logical for you and this makes perfect sense and you're ready to, fire 25 people because that's going to hit our bottom line. I got it. Thanks. Now, are you willing to talk a little bit about how this is going to impact the morale and engagement and maybe a little bit about how we want to do it most effectively? And if they say no, then play with it a little, and work it. And then when they meet you in those other two, then I say thank you. So see how this is going to work better for everybody, isn't it? Because we thought through how people are going to receive this and how we're going to do it most efficiently. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Anybody else?
I just have a comment. I think sometimes we listen to respond. So sometimes the greatest gift you can give to somebody is just to truly be present with them and listen and not try to fix it.
So, which brain okay, does this sound familiar? All I want you to do is listen. Don't tell me what to do. Don't solve my problem, just listen. So me and my husband, he's the heart guy and I'm the gut guy, okay? So he buys me the flowery cards for Valentine's Day and the anniversary and the Christmas, right? And I give him $20 and tell him to go buy himself something. Okay? And I'm not kidding. It's been, and I swear to God, I think sometimes we recognize in ourselves that we need that counterbalance. But to your point, so what do they want to do? Connect. They just want to connect. Remember, the thing that people need most when they're having emotions is validation of that emotion, period. God, that sucks. Damn, that's hard. Isn't that infuriating when he does that? Right? That's all. What else? Other questions, comments? Yeah, Mark.
My question is, I know I'm logic. I've talked to you before. I realize I'm logic. And I struggle to work with someone that just thinks with their gut because it feels like they're just following through things and not thinking it through. So we really don't work well together for that reason. So you have advice for that?
Well, you're halfway there because you recognize which is your superpower and which is their superpower. So the challenge and opportunity is to meet them where they are. Okay, here's my example. Cindy, we need sexual harassment training next week for my department. You got it. I'm right there. I'll be there. This day, this time, I got it. Are you willing to talk with me for a minute about what the outcomes are that you want so I can make sure that I meet the needs of your group and what you want out of it? And then I guess I'd like to talk about how your people are going to feel about us springing this on them like this. Can we talk about that? And then ask them. Ask for permission to invite the other two brains. And to the degree that they're going to have more habit and default in one brain, it may be challenging or maybe easier. But at least when we're aware of that, we know what we're dealing with, right? Who else? Any other questions, comments, feedback? Yes. One more.
Do you have any tips on how to work on that self-control, put up those boundaries for those times when you have somebody that's very sensitive, in front of you? And I think most of us, even if you are that heart person and that comes very, very naturally, you still need to be able to put up those boundaries, and these are my feelings, these are their feelings.
Well, first of all, remember the example I gave you how I'd be running these sessions and I'd be so overwrought by the time, right? Same kind of thing. Number one, recognize that that's what's going on, that you're absorbing that. And then our need is to practice self-care, to recognize what's ours, what's theirs. Okay, it's their problem, not out, right? As much as we empathize, and we want to empathize, and then practice saying logically, okay, this is theirs, this is mine, and how do I take care of myself? Because I'm with you. HR is usually the one that gets all that stuff, and you can leave just yes, frazzled, angry, upset, ticked off. You go home, you feel exhausted, and you're not physically tired, you're spiritually tired. Your heart's tired because you've been, And remember what I said about our heart doesn't move as fast. That's why meditation, mindfulness, yoga, and self-care is so important, especially to those of us that have that connection superpower and are the connection superpower for our organizations. Right? Yeah. And just like I said, just recognizing that is helpful, right? Questions, comments, feedback? Yeah.
I worked with a bunch of therapists for several years.
Oh, geez.
They sometimes would play Tetris for 5-10 minutes.
Play what?
Tetris?
Yes?
Get into their brain.
Yes.
Their brain rather than their heart.
Yes.
Get out of their heart brain.
Yes.
So just a comment on that.
I find psychology people interesting because they're trying to bring logic to this and this, right? So it's interesting. So with that, I don't want to keep anyone. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.